The soft hum of engines filled the cabin of Flight 309, gliding through the upper layers of the atmosphere like a silver bird cutting through endless blue. The aircraft had just leveled off at 30,000 feet, and the seatbelt sign flickered off with a soft chime that most passengers barely noticed. A sense of calm wrapped around the cabin, a peaceful rhythm that only long-haul flights seemed to have. Stewards moved gracefully down the aisles, serving warm meals and polite smiles. The faint clatter of utensils mixed with muffled laughter, and a child giggled somewhere near the back, pressing his face against the window to watch the cotton-like clouds float below. In the cockpit, Captain Harris, a seasoned pilot with more than 2 decades in the skies, leaned back slightly in his seat. "Another smooth one," he said with a grin, adjusting his headset. His co-pilot, First Officer Reed, chuckled. "Let's hope it stays that way, Captain. I could use a flight without turbulence for once." "Don't jinx it," Harris replied, but his tone was easygoing. The two shared the kind of unspoken trust that came from thousands of hours together above the earth. Back in the main cabin, seat 14A sat by the left side window, a quiet pocket amid the chatter. The woman there, Lina Khan, appeared entirely at peace. Early 30s, calm eyes, and a posture that spoke of discipline, though her clothes were simple: jeans, a soft beige sweater, and a dark leather jacket folded neatly on her lap. She turned a page in her small black notebook, filled with tidy handwriting and a few sketches of aircraft silhouettes. Every so often, she glanced outside, her reflection merging with the endless white clouds. The elderly man seated beside her tried to make polite conversation. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" Lina smiled politely. "It always is." Her voice was quiet, steady, and carried a trace of accent that was hard to place. He nodded, but something about her stillness made him hesitate to ask more. There was a quiet gravity about her, like she was used to stillness, to watching rather than speaking. The intercom buzzed to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've reached our cruising altitude of 30,000 feet. Weather ahead looks clear, and we expect a smooth journey all the way to London. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your flight." A ripple of relief passed through the passengers. Drinks clinked, seats reclined, and a soft playlist began to hum through the cabin speakers. Lina closed her notebook and looked out once more. The world below was invisible, hidden beneath thick clouds. But in her eyes, there was something more than calm, something like remembrance. For a moment, her hand moved over a faint scar near her wrist, then returned to rest on the armrest. To everyone else, she was just another passenger. But if anyone had looked closely, they might have noticed the faint outline of a military tag tucked beneath her sleeve, engraved with a single word: Echo 1. 2 hours had passed since Flight 309 took off from Dubai. The cabin was filled with the quiet rhythm of a long flight, the hum of engines, the faint clinking of teacups, and the low murmur of conversations. Most passengers had settled into their seats, lulled by the comfort of altitude and routine. In the cockpit, Captain Harris was mid-sentence, describing to First Officer Reed how he once landed in a storm over Singapore. He laughed softly, his hand resting lightly on the control yoke. Then, it happened. Without warning, Harris's voice cut off. His smile vanished. His hand slipped from the throttle, fingers twitching as if searching for something. For half a heartbeat, Reed thought he was joking, but then the captain's body slumped forward, lifeless, heavy, against the controls. "Captain?" Reed's voice cracked with confusion. "Captain Harris." No response. The plane gave a sudden jolt as the nose dipped slightly. Warning alarms flickered on the panel. The autopilot disengaged with a sharp beep, and the aircraft began to tilt. Reed's heart pounded. "Mayday, Captain down. Request medical assistance." He fumbled with the radio, his fingers trembling as he tried to steady the yoke with one hand. Inside the cabin, passengers felt it immediately. The floor seemed to tilt beneath their feet, coffee spilled, and a few screamed as the plane dropped 100 feet in a sudden lurch. Overhead, bins rattled. Babies cried. The calm atmosphere vanished in seconds. Flight attendants rushed into action. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated and fasten your seatbelts, one of them shouted, her voice trembling slightly despite her training. In seat 14A, Lina Khan's eyes snapped open. She had felt the change in pitch before anyone else. Her gaze flicked to the wings, watching the tilt, listening to the engine sound. It wasn't catastrophic yet, but it was wrong. She could hear it. In the cockpit, Reed was doing everything he could to stabilize. The controls were heavy, the jet was unbalanced. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he tried to keep his voice calm over the intercom. This is your first officer speaking. Please remain seated. If there's any medical professional on board, please come forward immediately. A nurse and a doctor scrambled up the aisle, guided by the cabin crew toward the cockpit. But Lina stayed still, her jaw tightening as she glanced toward the cockpit door. Something in her instinct told her it wasn't just a medical emergency. It was a crisis of control. Seconds later, the plane dipped again, harder this time. Passengers screamed. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling like pale ghosts swinging from strings. In the cockpit, Reed's voice cracked through the radio. If anyone on board has flight experience, please come forward. For a long, frozen moment, no one moved. Then, quietly, Lina unbuckled her seatbelt. Her eyes were steady, calm, almost cold, the kind of calm that only comes from someone who has faced chaos before. Without a word, she stood up. And for the first time, Flight 309 had hope. For a few seconds, chaos ruled the cabin. Screams, prayers, and the rattling hum of engines filled the air as Flight 309 trembled mid-sky. The aircraft had dipped low enough for passengers to feel the pull in their stomachs. The oxygen masks swayed like pendulums, and the cabin lights flickered in and out. Through the confusion, Lina Khan rose from her seat, calm amid the panic. Her movements were precise, controlled, as if her body had trained for this moment long ago. Passengers stared, some shouting at her to sit down, others too terrified to speak. A flight attendant, Sophie, blocked her way. "Ma'am, please, return to your seat. It's not safe up there." Lina met her eyes, her tone steady and sharp. "The captain's down. You're losing altitude. If I don't help, we won't make it." Something in her voice, authority, not panic, made Sophie freeze. For a brief second, the chaos around them blurred, and all she saw was the calm in Lina's eyes. She nodded and moved aside. Lina walked up the aisle, the floor tilting slightly beneath her as the aircraft continued to descend. Her boots clicked against the metal panels, each step echoing like a countdown. People turned to watch her, clutching their seats and whispering prayers. When she reached the cockpit door, the co-pilot's voice came through the intercom, strained and breaking. "If anyone can fly, please, I need help." Lina knocked once on the reinforced door. "Cabin crew, open it," she said firmly. Inside, First Officer Reed was drenched in sweat, one hand gripping the yoke, the other fighting with radio controls. The doctor knelt beside Captain Harris, trying to revive him. The plane was drifting lower, the altitude warning beeping like a heartbeat that was slowly fading. The door opened, and Lina stepped inside. Reed turned, startled. "Who are you?" "You can't—" "Call me Echo 1, she interrupted, sliding into the captain's seat. "Former Air Force pilot. Just tell me the status." He stared at her, unsure whether to believe. But desperation overruled doubt. "Autopilot's off. Left engine stable. We're losing lift." "Got it." Her hands moved across the controls with familiarity that startled him. Her posture shifted, back straight, eyes forward, voice clipped and professional. "Flight 309 declaring emergency. Captain incapacitated. Echo 1 taking command. Request immediate descent clearance." The tower responded instantly, surprised at the unfamiliar call sign. "Echo 1, confirm identity?" Former squadron leader Lina Khan, Pakistan Air Force, confirming control of Flight 309. The radio went silent for a moment. Then came the firm reply. "Copy that. Echo 1, you're cleared to divert to Muscat Air Base. Coordinates incoming." Reed stared, stunned. "Air Force?" he whispered. She didn't look up. Once, a long time ago. Outside the cockpit window, The horizon tilted as she leveled the wings with smooth precision. The alarms faded, and the aircraft steadied, slicing through the sky with renewed grace. Behind the door, the cabin grew quiet. Passengers still held their breath, but the plane was no longer falling. And for the first time since the collapse, hope returned, because the quiet woman from seat 14A was no longer a passenger. She was Echo 1, and she was flying them home. The cabin was silent except for the soft hum of the engines and the faint beeping from the cockpit. For the past 20 minutes, every soul aboard Flight 309 had been suspended between fear and faith, their lives held in the steady hands of a woman they barely knew. Inside the cockpit, Lina Khan, Echo 1, focused on the glowing instruments before her. Sweat glistened on her temple, but her voice remained calm as she coordinated with air traffic control. Flight 309 descending to 5,000 feet. Flaps at 15. Gear down on my mark. Beside her, First Officer Reed followed her lead like a student beside a master. The trembling in his hands had faded. Lina's composure was contagious. Below them, the lights of Muscat Air Base twinkled. Like a necklace in the desert night, the runway a lifeline cutting through darkness. Ground crews were already preparing for an emergency landing. The control tower's voice came through the headset. Echo 1, you are cleared for emergency landing. Winds calm. Runway 29 clear. Lina's eyes narrowed slightly. Copy that. Aligning for final approach. As the plane began its descent, passengers clutched each other's hands. A mother whispered prayers into her child's hair. The elderly man from seat 14B stared at the window, murmuring, "Please, let her bring us home." The cabin crew moved down the aisle, securing the last few belts. Sophie, the flight attendant who had let Lina through, stopped midway and looked toward the cockpit door, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Come on, Echo 1. Bring us down safe." Inside, Lina gripped the controls, feeling the familiar vibration beneath her palms. The same sensation she'd known years ago flying fighter jets through the thin mountain air of Xizang. But this time, it wasn't a drill. There were 182 lives depending on her. "Reed, flaps full. Landing gear down. Keep her steady." "Roger that," he said, his voice low but firm. The runway lights grew larger, brighter. Seconds now separated them from the ground. The engines roared, the cabin shook, and the wheels met the tarmac with a heavy thud. The plane bounced once, then settled. The brakes screeched, sparks flew, and the giant metal bird slowed, slower, until it rolled to a stop. Silence. Then came the sound. First a gasp, then applause, then full-throated cheering that filled the aircraft like a storm of relief. People cried, hugged strangers, and pressed their hands to their hearts. In the cockpit, Lina exhaled slowly, her shoulders finally relaxing. Reed looked at her in awe. "You just saved us all," he whispered. She smiled faintly. "I just did what I was trained to do." As paramedics rushed in to take Captain Harris away, Reed turned to the passengers gathering near the cockpit door and said quietly, "She wasn't just a pilot. She was Captain Lina Khan, call sign Echo 1, the first woman in her squadron to land a fighter jet blindfolded in training." The words spread through the cabin like a wave. Cameras flashed, tears flowed, and somewhere near seat 14A, a child whispered, "She's a real hero." Outside, dawn began to rise over the horizon, golden light spilling over the parked aircraft. The world would soon hear about the quiet woman who rose from the shadows of the cabin to command the sky. That morning, Echo 1 didn't just land a plane. She reminded the world that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they sit quietly by the window, waiting for the call.